Makita na akong screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Mag-insert sa kuha kay akong insert rows. Insert rows. Ay. Insert rows. So I will show first the main heading. So in the spreadsheet, you're going to indicate the main heading at the center of your paper. Center. Okay. What's the business name?
Oxy Manufacturing Company, miss.
Correct. So I will write here first the business name. Then on the second line at the center will be the name of the report, which summarizes the cost incurred by cutting and assembly department. So I will write here cost of production report hyphen. Then I will indicate the method used in process costing. So for this exercise 4-5, we are using first in, first out method. Now remember, in process costing, there are only two alternative methods to be used. Either you use the weighted average method or you use the first in, first out method. So on the third line, at the center of your spreadsheet will be the period covered. So this is for the month of October, which ends on October 31. We will use the year 2022 kay wa pa man ta moabot sa October of 2023. The year is not specified in this exercise. So we'll just assume the use of 2022. So October 31, 2022, which is the date for the journal entries to be made. So the first section in the cost of production report is the quantity schedule. When you make the quantity schedule, you have to remember the equation sources must be equal to the targets. When we say sources, these are the units to be accounted for, which represents where the units come from, or the total units assigned to this department for this month for them to work on. So that refers to our sources of the units assigned this month to be worked on by the department. So that includes the work in process beginning. So like in the cutting department, the work in process beginning is 1,000 units. So that means the 1,000 units were started last month, but they were not completed yet last month. They are still in process at the end of September. Ako sang i-change ang format ha sa date. Format cells, date. Okay, so in the quantity schedule, so we have here the work in process beginning, or I just shortened it as IPB. But in aside, you can put there WIPB. Okay, followed by the parenthetical disclosure that is 90% complete as to materials, 40% complete as to labor, 20% complete as to overhead. This parenthetical disclosure or the parenthetical notation will serve as your clue as to how many columns are you going to provide in computing the equivalent production. Since the percentage of materials, since the percentage applied to materials is not the same percentage applied to labor and not the same percentage applied to overhead, then we shall provide one column for the calculation of EP for materials, separate from the calculation of EP for labor, and separate column for the calculation of EP for overhead. So the 1,000 units are the units started last month in the cutting department. Wala lang nahuman, so they have to continue working on them this month. So ang wa matiwas last month or wa mahuman last month, tiwason this month until the units have been completed. Another possible source kung asa gikan ang units nga trabahoon this month by the department is the RPD received from previous department or the cost transferred in. So this caption does not apply to cutting because cutting has no previous department as it is considered as the first department. But we place the caption here because that is needed by the subsequent department, which is assembly department. And we write the caption only once on the left-hand side of the spreadsheet. Followed by another source, which is the SIP, started into process. So the SIP of 9,000 units should be understood as the number of units started this month by cutting. Ang gisugdan pagtrabaho just this month by cutting. So in the cutting department, they have two sources, the IPB and the SIP. Therefore, the total sources here is equal to 10,000 units. So what happened to the 10,000 units that they worked in October? 8,500 of that were finished and transferred out to assembly department. So kung unsay mahuman sa department, i-transfer na to the next department for another processing until such time that they are completed. So kung wanay further processing, then it will be transferred out ultimately to the warehouse awaiting delivery or shipment. So of the 10,000 units assigned this month for them to work on, 8,500 were completed and transferred out. The remaining 1,500 are still in process at the end of this month. And this work in process end of 1,500 units ni cutting is 100% complete as to materials, 80% complete as to labor, and 100% complete as to overhead. So notice, we maintain the equality of the two sides of our equation. Sources should be equal to the total targets. So after completing the quantity schedule, the next step or step 2 would be to compute the equivalent production. So just like the quantity schedule, the EP schedule will not be expressed in peso amounts. Instead, both quantity schedule and EP schedule will be reported in terms of the measurement used for their output. How the output is being measured. Is it measured in terms of kilograms or kilos? Is it measured in terms of pounds? Is it measured in terms of tons? Or whatever is the measurement used for the output. So if in case the measurement is not specified in the problem, then we will just use the units as the standard measurement for their output. So here we have 1,000 units started last month, while the 9,000 units were started just this month. So in computing the EP under first in, first out, there are two alternative methods of computing EP. Method 1 is using the shortcut method. Method 2 is using the flow of the units in the department. So the most the easiest method in computing EP is method 1 because that's the shortcut method. So the shortcut would be like this. Remember, the company is using first in, first out. So all finished units will be multiplied by 100%. So in the cutting department, they have 8,500 units finished. So multiply it by 100% since it is 100% complete as to materials, labor, and overhead. That is why you write 8,500 in all the three columns. Then add your EP in IPE, multiply the given percentage of completion by the number of units still in process at the end of the month for cutting. So 100% sa materials times 1.5 equals 1,500. That's the EP in IPE for materials in cutting department. So to get the EP in IPE for labor sa cutting department, multiply 80% by 1,500 and you will get the EP for labor 1,200. Do the same thing for overhead. 100% sa overhead times 1,500 equals 1,500. Minus your EP in IPB. Why deduct it? Because that was already applied last month. So for materials applied last month, 90% sa materials times the 1,000 units started last month equals 900. So deduct 900 sa materials. For labor, multiply 40% by 1,000 and you will get 400. So deduct 400 for labor. For overhead, multiply 20% by 1,000 units and you will get 200. So deduct 200. So F&T plus EP in IPE minus your EP in IPB gives you your EP under first in, first out, which is 9,100 for materials. Mauna ang EP sa materials using first in, first out. Sa labor, 8,500 plus 1,200 minus 400 equals 9,300 units. So that is your EP for labor using first in, first out. For overhead, 8,500 plus 1,500 minus 200 equals EP for overhead using first in, first out is 9,800. had you not deducted your EP in IPB, then what will appear here is the EP under weighted average. So under weighted average method, the EP is calculated based on the rule that all finished units will be multiplied by 100%, while the unfinished units will be multiplied by the given percentage applied to the cost element times the number of units still in process at the end of the month. So the sum of these two gives you your EP under weighted average. But if the sum of these two is will be having a deduction for the EP in IPB, so what remains is your EP under first in, first out. So after that, the next step is to prepare the cost charged to the cutting department or CCTD. This CCTD section is assigning peso amounts to our sources. Duha raman ang sources ni cutting, ang IPB ug ang SIP. So that is why sa cost charge to the cutting department, you determine the value of the work in process beginning, which is the costs last month. So our cost last month for the first department includes the material cost last month ni cutting, 8,010, plus the labor cost last month ni cutting, 1,750, plus the overhead cost ni cutting last month, 790. So adding the MLO last month ni cutting gives you a total of 10,550 pesos. So that is your work in process beginning. There's no need to compute the unit cost of the beginning inventory. Why? Because that was already reported in the September cost of production report. Remember that this work in process beginning is a forwarded amount. This was the work in process at the end of September. Kay tiwason pa man pagtrabaho ang 1,000 units this month in the cutting department. That is why the MLO last month for the 1,000 units would be forwarded in the October cost of production report as work in process beginning. So ayaw na pag-compute sa unit cost sa beginning inventory. Next item is the CPD. What is CPD? Costs from previous department. Dili na Cebu Police Department. Cost from previous department. Also known as CTI. Costs transferred in. Kung naatay transferred in, naagyud na'y transferred out. Pero ang cost transferred out is placed under cost assignment section to get the value of what we call F&T. So the CPD or CTI does not apply to cutting because cutting has no PD. It has no previous department. But we provided the caption CPD or cost transferred in for the next department, which is the assembly department. And you will notice, class, okay, you will notice that ang value sa F&T, ang value sa F&T ni cutting, the 128,350, is carried forward to the assembly department as its cost from PD. Dili na work in process begin. This is the CPD CPD this month nga na-receive ni assembly from cutting. So it's not only the units, the 8,500 units that are transferred out, it goes with it the accompanying cost of the units transferred out, which is the 128,350. So ang F&T ni cutting maoy CPD or cost transferred in this month ni assembly. Okay? So next, we go back to the CPR ni cutting department. So we just wrote the caption on the left side. Okay, you will write it only once. But definitely we don't have CPD for cutting. Followed by valuing the units started this month. So we call it cost added this month. The materials, labor, and overhead added this month by cutting department. So we have material cost this month ni cutting is 81,900. The labor cost this month ni cutting is 18,600. The overhead this month ni cutting is 39,200. So we will compute on the right side the unit cost. Remember, we are using first in, first out. So to get the unit cost of materials under first in, first out, it would be material cost this month, 81,900 divided by your EP for materials under first in, first out, 9,100 equals the unit cost of materials, 9 pesos. For labor, it would be labor cost this month, 18,600 divided by EP for labor, 9,300 equals 2 pesos. For overhead this month, 39,200 divided by EP for overhead, 9,800 equals 4 pesos. Add the 3 unit cost. So 9 plus 2 plus 4 equals the unit cost to be accounted for at 15 pesos. So under the TC or total cost column, you add the work in process beginning or cost last month, 10,550, plus the cost added this month for materials, labor, and overhead. So adding cost last month and cost this month gives you the total cost to be accounted for by cutting 150,250 pesos. So notice that we are assigning peso amounts to our sources. The work in process beginning and the unit started and into process. Okay, next step is the cost assignment. When we say cost assignment, that is assigning peso amounts to the targets. So as you can see in the quantity schedule, we have 2 targets, the F&T and the work in process N. So to get the value of F&T, remember we are using first in, first out method. So F&T is 8,500 units, as you can see in the quantity schedule. The IPB is 1,000 units. So there were 1,000 units started last month, wala mahuman. So gitiwas this month. So part ang 1,000 units sa finished and transferred out this month. So sa 8,500 na completed and transferred out, ang 1,000 ana were started last month but completed this month. The remaining balance, so 8,500 minus 1,000 equals the balance of 7,500 units. So that is the F&T that were started just this month and completed also just this month. So 100% ang work done on the 7,500 units of the F&T. So of the F&T nga 85, the 1,000 units are being costed based on the materials, labor, and overhead applied last month with a total of 10,550. So, di ba sa CCTD section natay work in process beginning, you just copy the same amount as work in process beginning under the cost assignment section. After that, you take up the cost added to beginning inventory. Okay, going back to quantity schedule. Ang atong 1,000 units that were started last month, 90% ra ang gi-apply last month for materials, 40% ang gi-apply sa labor last month, 20% ang gi-apply sa overhead last month. Kay nahuman man siya this month, ang 1,000 units, so the complement of these percentages are the ones applied this month. So ang material cost added to the beginning inventory of 1,000 units is 10% for materials. Times the 1,000 units started last month, sumpayi dayon sa unit cost of materials which is 9. And you will get 900 pesos. For labor, 40 complements of 40% is 60%. So ang 60% sa labor was applied just this month para makompleto na siya. Then times 1,000 units ang started last month times the unit cost of labor at 2 pesos equals 1,200. For overhead, 20% ang gi-apply last month. So to complete it this month, apply the remaining 80%. So 80% is applied to the 1,000 units started last month times the unit cost of overhead at 4 pesos equals 3,200. Okay, next would be the, wait. Okay, next would be the started and completed. Remember our F&T is 8,500 units, of which the 1,000 units were started last month. So ang remaining 7,500 were started this month and completed also this month. Kay karon man gisugdan og trabaho, karong buwan na gisugdan pagtrabaho ni Kating, nahumansad in this month ni Kating. So, ang percentage of work done this month ni Kating to the 7,500 units is 100%. So, times the unit cost to be accounted for, unit cost to be accounted for, then you will get the value for the started and completed, 112,500. So, cost last month plus the cost added this month to your beginning inventory, these three, then plus the costs added to the units started this month and completed also this month, 112,500. That gives you a total of 128,350, which is the value assigned to F&T. So next, we will get the value of work in process and basta na ay subsequent department, the calculation of the IPA starts with CPD. But we don't have that valuation for Kating because Kating has no previous department. So the material cost sa IPA ni Kating, it would be, there are 1,500 units still in process at the end of the month for Kating times percentage of completion for materials is 100% sa IPE times the unit cost for materials at 9 will give you 13,500. To get the labor cost for the IPE, it would be IPE of 1,500 units times 80% for labor times the unit cost of labor at 2 equals 2,400. For overhead sa IPE, it would be 1,500 units ang IPE times 100% for overhead times the unit cost of overhead at 4 equals 6,000. So adding these three amounts gives you a total of 21,900. That is the work in process end of the cutting department. So F and T ni cutting plus the work in process end ni cutting gives you the total cost as accounted for 150,250. So you will notice ang total cost charged to cutting department this month is equal to the total cost assigned to the two targets ni cutting department. They should always be the same. They should always be equal. Otherwise, if they are not, then that is already an indication that there is something wrong with your computation. So now we go to the CPR for the subsequent department called Assembly Department. So quantity schedule ni Assembly. So IPB ni Assembly 2,000 units with the parenthetical notation 75% complete as to materials, 60% complete as to labor and overhead. Kay pariha raman ang percentage applied to labor and overhead, only one column is provided for the EP computation. Since the percentage applied to materials is different from the percentage applied to L&O, then you provide a separate column for materials. So the RPD ni assembly was the F&T ni cutting, isn't it? So when you add IPB of 2,000 and the RPD of 8,500, the total sources ni assembly or the total units assigned to be worked on by assembly in October is 10,500 units. So what happened to the 10,500 units assigned to assembly? 9,500 units of that were finished and transferred out to the warehouse. The remaining 1,000 units are still in process at the end of the month for assembly. So after completing your quantity schedule, we will now compute the EP for materials and conversion costs. So remember, we are using first in, first out. So finished units will be multiplied by 100%, so times 9,500 units. Then add your EP in IPE. So 60% sa materials times 1,000 equals 600. That's the EP in IPE for materials. To get the EP in IPE for L&O or conversion cost, you multiply 40% by 1,000 units and you'll get 400. Kay first in first out man ang atong gi-compute nga EP, then deduct the EP in IPB. So 75% sa materials times the IPB of 2,000 units equals 1,500. Mo na imong i-deduct nga EP in IPB for materials. For the EP in IPB for L&O, it would be 60% sa L&O times 2,000 equals 1,200 to be deducted. So bring down the balance. So we have 8,600 as your EP for materials using first in, first out. EP for L&O using first in, first out is 8,700. So we will now go to the cost charged to the department. So our work in process beginning consists of 4,000, which is the CPD last month ni assembly department, plus the 400 nga material cost last month ni assembly, plus the labor cost last month ni assembly, 800, plus the overhead last month ni assembly, 1,600. So the total cost is 6,800 pesos. That is the work in process beginning ni assembly department, or the sum of your CPD last month and the MLO last month ni assembly. So that is the work in process beginning of the assembly department. Next is the CPD this month ni assembly. So notice class, nabiya tayo CPD last month, which is part of the work in process beginning. So ang CPD this month, mauna ang F&T ni cutting, which is forwarded to assembly department representing the cost from previous department this month, or the cost transferred in this month from cutting. So to get the unit cost from PD or the unit cost transferred in, it would be CPD this month, 128,350. Divided by the units received from PD, which is 85. And you will get the unit cost from PD or the unit cost transferred in 15.1. Kay kung weighted average pa ang atong gigamit, then it would be, ang formula to get the average unit cost from PD would be ang CPD last month nga 4,000 plus the CPD this month 128,350. The sum of those two will be divided by the IPB of 2,000 units and the RPD of 85. So ang atong divisor to get the unit cost from PD, kung nag-weighted average pa ta, is 10,500. Pero kay first in, first out man ang atong gigamit sa exercise 4-5, so your divisor will just be the units received from PD. Okay, so it will be CPD this month divided by RPD this month will give you the unit cost from PD or the unit cost transferred in under first in, first out, 15 pesos and 10 centavos. So for the material cost this month, 30,100, i-divide na sa EP for materials under first in, first out, 8,600, will give you the unit cost of materials, 3.5. To get the unit cost of labor, it would be labor cost this month, 21,315, divided by EP for labor, 8,700, will give you the unit cost of labor at 2.45. For overhead, the overhead this month, 30,015, divided by EP for overhead, 8,700, equals the unit cost of overhead, 3.45. So adding unit cost from PD, material, the unit cost of materials, unit cost of labor, and unit cost of overhead, you come up with a total of 24.5. That is the unit cost to be accounted for. So under the total cost na column, you add your work in process beginning of 6,800 your CPD this month 128,350 and the cost added this month kining tulo, it brings you to your total cost charge to the assembly department this month 216,580. After that, we go to the last section, which is cost assignment. So let us now determine the value for the F&T using first in, first out. So under for the F&T, you start with cost last month or work in process beginning. Just copy the work in process beginning in the previous section, the 6,800. Then add the costs applied to your beginning inventory. If you look at the quantity schedule, the 2,000 units started last month ni assembly was 75% complete as to materials. So to complete it this month, apply the remaining 25% sa materials times 2,000 units that were started last month times the unit cost of materials at 3.5 equals 1,750. For the labor cost added to the beginning inventory, the complement of 60% is 40%. So 40% of labor is added to the 2,000 units that were started last month times the unit cost of labor, which is 2.45 equals 1,960. For overhead, the remaining 40%, this one, the remaining 40% of the 2,000 units started last month multiplied by the unit cost of overhead, 3.45 equals 2,760. So remember, ang atong F&T ni assembly is 9,500, of which 2,000 units of that were started last month. So if you deduct 2,000 from 9,500, that gives you a balance of 7,500 units. So this is the portion of the F&T that were started just this month and completed also this month. That is why the work done just this month is 100%. I-multiply dayon sa unit cost to be accounted for, which is the 24.5 equals the value for the unit started and completed this month is 183,750. So cost last month or work in process beginning 6,800 plus the cost added to beginning inventory plus the cost applied to those units started and completed this month 183,750. So the sum of these items will give you a total of 197,020, which is the value of F&T ni assembly department. So now let us compute the work in process and ni assembly. So the IPE for the subsequent department will start with the calculation of CPD. So there are 1,000 units still in process at the end of the month ni assembly. Multiply it outright by the unit cost from PD 15.1 equals 15,100 pesos. For the material cost sa IPE, okay, balik ta sa iyang quantity schedule. Sa quantity schedule, ang EP in IPE for materials is 600. Sumpay dayon sa unit cost of materials 3.5 equals 2,100. To get the labor cost sa IPE, your EP and IPE for overhead 400 or your EP and IPE for labor is 400 times the unit cost of labor 2.45 equals 980 pesos. For overhead, you have EP for overhead in IPE times the unit cost ni overhead 3.45 equals 1,380. So adding CPD, materials, labor, and overhead sa IPE gives you a total of 19,560 pesos. So maon ni, sama ni, wait. Okay, so 19,560 ang work in process end ni assembly department. So F&T plus IPE will give you the total cost as accounted for ni assembly department, which is 216,580, which is the same as the total under cost charge to the department, 216,580. After that, we'll have the journal entries. So in the cutting department, on October 31, 2022, you make the entry to record the current production cost for the month of October for cutting department. So naana siya sa inyong CPR ni cutting. So balik ka sa cost charged to the department or cost added by the department. So kini ang 81,900 nga material cost added this month ni cutting. So credit materials 81,900, credit payroll for the labor cost added ni cutting 18,600. Then credit applied factory overhead for 39,200. So add the MLO ni cutting, it gives you a total of 139,700. Charge it or debit it to work in process of cutting department. So that is the first entry to record the materials, labor, and overhead incurred by cutting department in the month of October. After that, record the transfer of the units and the accompanying costs from cutting to assembly. So kining imong F&T nga 128,350 ni cutting, it will now be transferred out to assembly. So debit work in process assembly department 128,350, credit work in process cutting department 128,350. So explanation, cost transferred in to assembly department, or pwede sad cost transferred out by cutting department to assembly department. So in the assembly department, to record its production cost in October, okay, you have credit materials 3,100. Gikan na dito sa taas katong cost charge to the department. So kini siya, kining material cost added this month. So you credit materials at 30,100, credit payroll for the labor cost of 21,315, credit applied factory overhead, 30,015. Gikan na dire. Then add these three you get a total of 81,430, which is charged to work in process of the assembly department. After that, record the units and the amount transferred out to the bodega. So debit finished goods inventory for the F&T of 197,020 and credit work in process assembly department 197,020. So explanation, cost of the completed units, or you can say cost of the units transferred out to the warehouse. So those are the journal entries in process costing. Are there any questions? Nakasunod ra sa discussion?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, miss.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Miss, mangutan ako, miss, kanang. Is it necessary to record the total production cost in both departments?
Yes. Kay they are spending for that amount while producing the units in their department. So pila ilang nagasto pag-process sa units that were assigned to them to work on for the month. So gikan sa pag-process, di ba, nag-una sa gi-process ang units sa cutting. Pag human pag-process sa cutting department, i-forward na to assembly department. So, ang cost from cutting is forwarded to assembly. Ang cost forwarded to assembly is added to the cost incurred by assembly department. So that comprises na how much is the total accumulate siya. Mo nang ma-determine nimo pila di ay ang total cost paghimo ani nga product. So gihimo na nga product in two departments, both in cutting and assembly. So you have to combine the costs incurred in those two departments for the finished products that were ultimately transferred out to the warehouse. Pareha good sa job order costing. Kung ang customer's order is processed in 2 or 3 departments, imo sang i-total ang cost sa paghimo sa maong job order for in the 3 departments so that you will know pila di ay tanan ang total cost for producing this job order. And by knowing pilay total cost na gasto sa manufacturer, then the manufacturer would know at what price should they bill the customer. Pilay i-charge nila sa customer. So cost of producing the product plus the desired markup equals the selling price, the amount that will be charged to the customer. Mosad na sa process costing. Imo sang i-determine pilay cost na incur sa cutting department, pilay cost na incur sa assembly department. I-total ang tanan, then you will know what is the total cost of the units completed and transferred out to the warehouse. So that you add the desired markup and you will know at what price will you ask your customer to pay for the manufactured or completed products.
Okay po, miss. Thank you po.
Any other questions or clarifications? I hope nasabtan ninyo no ang flow of the units from one department to another, as well as the flow of the costs from one department to another until it will ultimately be transferred out to the warehouse. Kiniha, wala patay spoilage. Wala patay defective units. Ma-complicated ang problem if there are production losses involved. So sa pagkakaroon, nag-prepare ta og cost of production report without any production losses yet. Without any spoilage or defective units yet. Kay once na ay production losses, ma-affected na ang atong unit cost from PD. The unit cost from previous department. Okay. Pag first department, wala pa ma-lost ang units or wala pa ma-spoiled. Pag abot sa subsequent departments, diha na spoiled ang units, diha na lost ang units. So, kung ma-lost ang units in the subsequent department, the question now is, at what stage were they found to be spoiled or defective? Nawa ba siya at the start of the process? Now spoiled ba siya during the process? Or na lost ba siya or spoiled ba siya at the end of the process? So you'd have to figure out at what stage of the manufacturing process were they lost or spoiled. So kung dunay spoilage, dunay defective units, then you have to know how many of that is normal, how many of that is considered abnormal, lost units. So kung wala lay lost units or spoiled units, sayon raman ang costing. Sayon raman ang pag-prepare sa cost of production report. Ma-complicated lang siya kung naanay production losses nga mahitabo. So is that understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? I understand at the start, no, murag makaingon gid mo nga mura maglisod ning process costing nga topic. Oy, no, kay daghan kay tagtiman-an. Pero as you are used to it, with constant practice, you find it easy